The Insect God by A.L. Hodges. I watch the bugs dying all the time now, laying there, kicking the air with their skeletal fibrous legs, flopping on useless abdomens in the seizure of life's recalcitrant cessation. The Grim Reaper pulls hard, and I wonder what the less developed forms of life feel as they are jerked from their mortal coils. Man invents legends to explain an experience so personal as to be essentially incommunicable. What then do those without speech even know of the final moments when the lights shut out? The door slams closed, and only a husk remains. In the kitchen I watch. Cockroaches. Flop flop, legs kicking. I could watch them for hours. And I know. It's the house, of course. They are invaders to something they cannot understand. Like germs in the human body, chaos is a structured organisation that represents something incomprehensible to them. They weave their way through its nervous system and do not understand it any more than the Neanderthal could grasp the complexities of the starry sky above him. Do insects invent gods, I wonder? Do they create legends about the thing whose blood vessels they carelessly navigate? And what of us humans? Are we bogeymen? Which they deny the existence of until a fly swatter claims, inexplicably, one more of their kinsmen. It's a beautiful place, old and picturesque, like a dollhouse, all ambience with lacy trim. When I moved in, I dismissed the legends as local folklore. After the breakdown, Father rented it for me. A little cottage that was both secluded and cheap. I wanted quiet. A place where the days could blend together for a few months before returning to work. Father had assured me that the office would take me back, that there was no harm done really, but it was critical that I get some rest. I'd been suffering from some absolutely miserable headaches, and so I agreed with him that some relief from the pressures of work was welcome. The house's isolation and bad reputation ensured I would not be disturbed, not even by the landlord, Mr. Brady, who I met only once. The house sat in a clearing deep in the woods, about 4 miles outside of a small town that was, itself, isolated by a mountainous region, still thick with greenery which was merely compliant with the local highway. The house was the only signs of human metrics in a place that was otherwise wild with naturalistic hedonism and botanical impulse. Yet despite its place amongst the untamed trees, the house itself was clean and neat, its brickwork and wooden trim untainted by either vines or filth. Even the garden out front bore nothing that was not domesticated. It was a kind of boundary, set between the excesses of the wilderness and the gorgeous architectural prudery of human rationality. The house had electricity, but was without any real appliances save a telephone. This was more or less what I wanted, a sense of peace and isolation. Plus, as I learned, the house is a good exterminator. It takes care of any pests that gets in on its own. Every morning, when I flick on the lights, I see them laying there. 1, 2, sometimes as many as 5 bodies, either writhing in their last moments or having already expired. Poor Mr. Brady, he is merely a specimen of that town, where an ignorant populace of just under 2,000 souls huddle together in fear of the local monster. He showed me around on my first day while the movers brought my things in, and acted as if he expected the very walls to bite him. He tiptoed about, speaking in that topsy-turvy, passive-aggressive way they all do, as if there is some secret that everyone knows but must not be spoken aloud for fear of calling down some doom or divine retribution. He kept looking at me sideways, the poor old fool, as if he wanted to ask me something but could never work up the nerve. I've had no visitors here since, but they still look at me askance in town. The first 2 weeks were bliss, except of course for the daily scatterings of dead bugs. If it weren't for the calendar, I wouldn't even know how many days had passed. I wrote, I painted, I read, I did whatever I wanted, and it was such a relief to enjoy my time as I wished. I would often go walking in the forest by day, only to return to my sanctuary as the sun began to set. It was like a temple to Gaia, the form of man's structured worship projected into the unstructured thing he revered. The only thing that changes from day to day is the house itself. I knew within 24 hours that the house was not ordinary. When I first saw it, I was struck by its haunting beauty, but I could not have fathomed how profoundly strange it was. Now I know that it is unique in many ways, some of them more inexplicable than others. I know that it changes, for instance. There are never more than 4 walls, but sometimes the walls in any given room are not the ones from the previous day. They are often the same colour and even bear the same fixtures, and yet they have changed. It is a difference so fundamental as to be indescribable. The very atoms seem to have been arranged in a manner that seeps through the paint, though the shade of the paint is uniform throughout the home. These alien walls appear daily, in different places but scattered in a patchwork of locations that differs day by day. I was frightened by my impressions of this phenomenon at first, but I have come to accept it. After all, it causes no inconvenience to myself, and only adds to the mystery of the place that draws me to it, like the embrace of a mysterious but beautiful woman. I've also seen the fireplace breathe, expanding and contracting like a giant thorax. I saw this for the first time during my first day, and thought it was only an optical illusion or some distortion in my vision brought on by one of my many migraines. And yet, the illusion repeated itself again and again, day after day. Though it is not constant, it is frequent enough to have become a commonplace observation. There is no television, so I often spend my evenings reading in my leather easy chair by the fireplace, usually with a fire burning to make the whole scenario more homey. Many evenings I would look up and see the brickwork expanding and contracting, moving like giant bellows. In conjunction with this, I have noticed that the house also breathes. There is no physical draft. On the contrary, the house is rather silent and temperate, especially at night. And yet, on many evenings past midnight, I will lay awake listening to the call of the night birds, only to have their cacophony suddenly fall silent as something moves through the corridors of the house. It makes no noise. This sense of presence, and yet its momentum can be felt through the walls. It begins on one side of the house, then makes its way past my room and out through the other in gentle, slow undulations, like the coming and receding of the tide. Its breath carries with it a smell that I cannot identify, one that tickles my nostrils with a sensation that words fail to describe. Not to say the sensation was unpleasant. On the contrary, it had a spicy feel to it, like incense. And yet, it was also otherworldly, bringing to mind shapes and forms that evade categorization. But why should those things bother me? After all, such a beautiful place could not help but pulsate with life. No, I loved this house and contemplated its contours daily. I would run my hand caressingly over the walls, feeling its blood pump beneath the plaster. Such a gorgeous body it had, such a wondrous geometry laced where simple symmetry was laced with non-Euclidean frills. I often contemplated its age. How many centuries had come and gone, and this stoic immortal had stood, powerful and imposing, defying nature's entropy. How many had passed through it, defiling it, only to understand all too late its capacity for self-preservation. But unlike myself, it was not composed of rampant cells destined to cancer and decay. Its walls were smooth, unbroken, and firm in their composition, yet maintaining an organic nature that seemed to be embedded in every grain of plaster and every splash of paint. On the Tuesday of my 3rd week, I went down to the basement for some wine. I woke up with a monstrous pounding in my brain, and I decided on a mid-morning aperitif to take the edge off. But as I descended the stairs, I found that they kept going down, 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 relentlessly. Odd, I thought, for there weren't supposed to be more than a baker's dozen, and yet, surely I'd traversed double that amount. I saw light at the bottom, and I started to run, taking them 2 at a time. Panic shot through me as I sensed that if I did not get to some solid ground, a calamity would befall me. My heart was pounding, and I realized immediately what had occurred. The house was toying with me. Yes, it was a game, of course. My house was amusing itself by growing new stairs to trip me up. But I would overcome the game, for I had no doubt that if I ran fast enough, I would catch up to the last step. And I did. Except, as I stepped off the stair, I found myself back in the kitchen. Or was I? Turning around, I saw that there was, indeed, a staircase going up. The very one I had taken into the basement for days now. I came to the incredible conclusion that this could not be the kitchen, but must be one merely exactly like the one upstairs that I had just left. Yes, an absolute duplicate. From the old humming refrigerator in the corner, to the sink to the white cabinets. The house was showing off. It had grown like a sponge budding, a replica of the kitchen. I clapped my hands in admiration. Only, I felt that I was not alone anymore. The shadowy corners hid secrets. Of this I was certain. No, I had to get out of here. Except, when I turned to the stairs, they were gone. I was looking up what might well have been a mine shaft, a tall box of shadows where I could only faintly see the light of the real kitchen overhead. The house had trapped me in its duplication, and now I could not return to the real thing. I looked about the kitchen. Perfect replica. I even saw cockroaches scattered over the linoleum floor, legs up, kicking. I stepped on one, and it popped, a sign of its reality. No, the kitchen was real, and this idea sent a thrill of horror through me, for it implied something that I could not put my finger to. Well, I reasoned, there were other ways out. There was another set of cellar steps, which led outside at the back. I made my way through the kitchen, crossed through a doorway, and into a hallway exactly like the one upstairs. The pictures on the walls were similarly identical, and I marveled at their perfection. Yes, the house had recreated everything as an exact copy, had expanded itself by recreating the upstairs downstairs. I found myself irritated at this. Why would it choose today to confound me so? And why trap me in its replication? Surely it had no reason to play such a prank on its devoted inhabitant, except out of pure meanness. But I could see the duplicate front door at the end of the hallway, and I wondered what would happen if I should pass through it. If I managed that, then perhaps I could finally be in the basement proper, and able to grab my wine and leave through the back way. The house would not be happy about losing its quarry, but I couldn't muck about down here all day. I started down the hallway, only to find that it began to contort. It twisted, like water going down the drain, and elongated itself, such that even moving as fast as I could, the door was out of my reach. The house did not want me to escape, or at least, not so easily. It was only when I paused in my exertions that the world returned to its usual contours, and I saw that I had not moved an inch. I felt my heart sink, and I wondered if I could at least go back into the kitchen, or would the house now shift itself so that all my movements proved futile? But when I looked up, I saw that my progress was impeded by a mirror. My own eyes stared back, my own stern face meeting my gaze. But my look of shock was not mimicked, and the face continued to glare at me. I realised then that it was not a mirror but another replication. The house had replicated me in addition to the rooms above. It was this doppelganger then that had been the source of my unease. For it now seemed only logical that in recreating its rooms, the house would ultimately be forced to recreate what dwelled within them. I tried to push past the clone, only to find that I was resisted. We fought, our hands flailing, as I tried to shoulder aside my double while my other self tried to hold me. The two of us fell in a pile on the floor and writhed about, a tangle of arms and legs as I tried to break free and crawl away while my mirror image held me fast. I finally managed to kick away from the thing that bore my exact features, and I began to crawl across the linoleum surface. There was light everywhere now, and the light from the kitchen lamp blared into my eyes. I was laying on my back, looking up at the ceiling. My limbs waved wildly into the air. My head was throbbing manically, the pain of a million tiny knives stabbing into my brain. Shapes and colours blasted through my mind as all my perceptions shattered into a million pieces. I realised, only then, that my mistake was believing in my exceptionalism. I was just another insect in the body of a god. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, comment, share and like, and press the bell to get notifications when new videos are uploaded. If you have a story that you want Jimmy Horrors to read, send it to jimmyhorrorsnarrations@gmail.com. Until next time, stay horrific everyone.